welcome you everybody to this talk of open source, the why, how, and when. I'm really glad to see you all and to connect with you all. And it really excites me that there are so many people who want to know more about open source. Let me introduce myself. I am Utkarsha and I'm a software engineer at BioRender, which is a Canada based startup whose mission is to be a go to trusted place where science can be communicated. And I work with a bunch of awesome developers and we are hiring. So, yeah, if you want to connect, we can do it later after my talk. Also, I have participated in Google Summer of Code 2020 at open source organization KVX, and I'm going to talk about it later in my slides. So stay tuned for that. I would like to start with my story here. Like, what was the first thing that uh, got me attracted to the open source? And yeah, what was the first intriguing thing I heard about open source? So I was a full time at that time, and I had a friend who was full time like me, and who used to go to these very fancy sponsored conferences all around the globe, Europe, Spain, and those sorts of yeah places. And I questioned him once, like, how are you getting these sponsored conferences? He answered that in his free time he works at this awesome open source called Wikimedia, and Wikimedia organizes a conference every year for its contributor to cherish its contributor, to celebrate the contributions that they have made. So that's actually a funny story. That's how I got interested. But as I got to know more about community, as I became the part of the community, I explored so much more. And I'm here to talk about my experiences about through this journey. And let me start with that. I'm no expert, but yeah, I would love to share some of my experiences that I had during the open source. I would like to start here with this quote by Philip Kahn, who is a famous entrepreneur and a firm believer of open source. The power of open source is the power of people, the people rule. So basically, this short quote delivers a very strong message about the power of people, and together we can bring a change. What is open source? Right now, I'm not able to see any of you. So, because I wanted to quickly know how many of you already know open source, how many of you already contributed in open source, or know what's or had an idea like what open source is. So I can't see you, but yeah, so I'm going to just dive into it. Open source is basically a community driven software which is publicly accessible and open for modification. But let me tell you, at the same time, there is no strict definition of an open source because it can vary, like with the licenses that software is using, as well as the community participation that is permitted for that software. So there is no strict definition of an open source, but it mainly more or less this is the generalized concept of an open source. So, as I mentioned, no strict definitions, so no strict requirements, but these are some very common good practices that are generally seen in an open source software, that the user should be treated as co-developer. He should have the access for the contributions and all. Early releases, the very good benefit of early releases is we have a lot of early feedback. So a lot of early feedback gives result to several versions because there's several iteration that goes on and frequent integrations. And one of the major practice is high modularized code, which is a very good practice if you're coding, definitely. And so yeah, these are some very good practices that the open source generally has. This is my favorite slide because there are so many misconceptions out there about open source, so many myths, and I want to like to talk about all of them, at least some of them. So there's the standard myth that open source is always free, which is true, but it is not if you are using it. It actually depends upon the license of the open source. So if you are using it for your individual purposes, it is free. But if you're using it for your development purposes, your business purposes, it might not be free. So that's totally a myth that it's always free. Second is only someone with strong tech background is able to contribute. That's another a big lie. And I have a whole slide dedicated to bust this myth. So yeah, I would like to talk about more of it in my next slides. Has restricted or access licensing. So many people think if there's a code which is publicly accessible, that's open source. That's not always the case. It has some patent or some license which is attached to it. Software quality is not enterprise level and is less secure. That's not the case. Many enterprises use, from database tooling to software frameworks to analytics tooling, they use the open source software at an enterprise level. So that is not true. Even the recent rover that went to Mars has so many open source packages. So that is not true that the quality is not as good as enterprise. The last point is open source contributors are not paid. Again, that is not true, because there are people who fund the contributors for the contribution in the software. So that's again not true. Now, after discussing a little bit about myths and requirements and what what the open software is, I would like to discuss the impact of open source software in software industry. That's really, really important. I would like here for you to take some seconds just to see the logos and just to see how many of these logos that you actually recognize or have used. So I'm pretty sure everybody has seen the VLC, the Firefox, and the Chromium, the Android. Did you all know that all these are open source? That's pretty cool, right? So yeah, so this is the level of impact that open source has on us right now. We use it in our day-to-day life without even realizing that we are using open source software. So that's why I wanted to present some of the major things that open source software are out there. Some more stats about open source, that we have around about 56 million developers who are actively contributing in open source software. We have 28 million repositories, 1.9 billion contributions. That's a lot. That's a lot of contributions in open source, which is great at the same time. And if you see at the right side, we have open source contribution by employees. Like if you see, we have different organizations with unique number of employees who are contributing in open source. And as we can see, the Microsoft is leading them all. So that's again a great thing. And you can see all these are top-notch companies. Yeah, just continuing the stats here. These stats represent number of the live websites who are using these frameworks. And these frameworks are pretty close to my heart because I'm a full stack developer. I use these frameworks in my everyday job. And these are some stats which blow my mind, that React is getting used in 7.5 million live websites, which is huge impact. So moving forward, I would like to talk a little bit about ingredients of the open source. So what open source is basically made of? It's made of people, of course, because it's a community-driven thing. So it has people. People could be contributors, authors, owners, community members. So that's there. And because most of the open source softwares are remotely developed, so the community has come up with several tools to help the process. So the other options like documentation, issue tracker, pull requests, discussions, these are basically tools for having an effective communication or effective development. So that's the basic ingredients of an open source. Now, if anyone is still on board why they should be contributing to open source, I think this slide's dedicated to answering all those questions. At least, yes, I have some major good points, why you should be contributing. So first is improving your existing skills. Even if it is coding, designing, writing, anything, if you possess a skill, you can just go to the open source project. You will see that there is a task for you. So you can just make sure that open source is a practice ground for you and just improve your existing skills. That's a good way to do it. The second thing is build your network. Meet the people in conferences, meet the people who think like you and grow your network. That's a great way to socialize and grow your network. Seriously, trust me, I've done that. Third is showcasing and building your profile. Just uh, for this, I'll just give you a very quick and interesting example. So, an interviewer asked me once, like, what do you do apart from your regular 9 to 5 job? And I showed him my, open source contributions, and he was so much impressed. So you can showcase and you build your profile, build your reputation. So that's a cool way to do that, and learn from your mentors. Grow to a level where you can be a mentor and teach others. So that's always a good thing. And satisfaction. So the level of satisfaction that you get contributing to a project that people are using, it's another level. So it's just a satisfaction of giving community back, and maybe just earn some extra money, because I've already told that you can earn money from open source. It's not always free. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons that you should be contributing. How to contribute. So, as I promised in one of my earlier slides, that I will bust this myth that only someone from technical background should be contributing or should be allowed to contribute or like can contribute. That is not true. Here, I have put very simple distinction between the technical contributions and non-technical contributions that you can do in an open source. In technical contributions, you can do code contributions, testing, automations. In non-technical contributions, you can do pretty interesting ones. So first is improving the documentation. If you're a writer, just go ahead and improve the documentation of the software, improve the README file, improve the code guidelines file. So something like that. If you're a designer, you can use your design skills in contributing to a software. You can help in adding the translations to the existing softwares and articles. This fourth way is like pretty simple and straightforward. If you go to a Wikipedia page, do you know you can edit it? Like obviously some of them, if there are permissions to edit. So just edit the article or create a new one and Wikipedia and publish it on Wikipedia, and just people will see, and you have contributed to open source and given the people access to knowledge. So yeah, that's another level of satisfaction as well. The last one is click and upload photographs. I know you might be confused what is this point. So there's an open source software called Wikimedia Commons, and Wikimedia, as you all know, that it's whole bunch of kind of dictionary for each and every word, like it has everything in it. So Wikimedia do accepts photographs, missing photographs of the articles. So you can just click a photograph and upload it to them, just submit it to their repository, and they might publish it. So that's another way of doing the contribution. So now, after talking about why and how, this is a very important question: that am I welcome everywhere? If I wanted to contribute in any software, should I go and should I get started? So the answer to this question is mostly yes, but that is not always the case. Why? So let me just tell you about different types of open source that is there out in the market. The first one could be the code is open source, but they are not very welcoming with the volunteers. Generally, the people who are contributing are part of organization. The second one could be the code is open, but only for very small issues they are accepting the PRs. And again, the core team is the part of organization. And third one can be totally free, like open source, where the contributors are the one who are running the show, who are making the contributions, seeing the roadmap, and doing each and everything, maintaining the code. So that's the third and most popular type of open source. So depending on these, you can choose, or you can answer this question: that am I welcome here or not? So moving on, the third part of my talk: when is the right time to start contributing? So it's either when you are studying, between jobs, full-time, part-time, weekends, vacations. What's the right time? What do you think is the right time to start? Just think about it for a second. I think the answer is pretty straightforward. It is whenever you get the time, whenever you are free, you should be contributing. Because the most enjoyable thing And most powerful thing which I feel with open source is that there is no hard commitment at all. So whenever you get time, just pick a task and complete it. That's all. Making your first contribution. So that is very tricky for anybody who is joining the open source. So let me tell you a very straightforward process which can help you making your first contribution. First of all, find a project. Find a project which you want to contribute in. For example, I'm a full stack dev, so I have a set of skills that I know I would like to contribute to a project which which aligns with my goals. So find a project which aligns with your goals, and then there would be some guidelines of how to contribute. Go to that guidelines. The third one would be, there are so many open source projects which has these cool labels: good first issue, good first contribution, like these. Find those labels and try to filter the tasks from those labels. Put the task, get the task, talk to your mentor or talk to anyone else in the team that you're interested in this task. Pick the task up, develop, create a pull request, and yeah, that's all. But let me tell you one thing of creating the pull request and merging it. So creating a pull request is one thing, getting it merge is another thing. So don't get disheartened if your pull request is taking a lot of time to merge. It happens. It happens. So be patient. There were so many times when my pull request took months to get merged. So just be patient. It's gonna get there. So that was my only feedback for the pull request. Just don't get disheartened if it is not getting merged immediately. After this, as promised, I would like to talk a little bit more about my Google Summer of Code experience. So, basically, what a Google Summer of Code is a program that is organized by Google, which funds students who are already contributing in open source during summers. So, that's basically a program. And yeah, there's a whole selection process. I'm not going to go through like into that. So I got selected for that, and I worked with an organization called KiwiX, which basically creates offline online which basically converts online wikimedias to offline zip files. And I worked on a project that was purely doing that. That's called MW Offliner. And the impact that I made was because the project, what it used to do was to convert the online Wikimedias to offline zip files so that anybody without internet access can use it. So that computation time, this is how many hours that I saved for that computation. So it was so much satisfactory because I knew that I am helping them, accelerating their goal of giving access to knowledge and education to everyone. So that was a great experience for me. And some of the like takeaways of my GSOC experience, I wanted to share it with you guys. Is there is a steep learning curve. So when I joined, when not joined, when I started, the code base was huge and there was minimal help because you have to figure out so many things out on your own. So be patient, don't get like frustrated, I would say. So there is a steep learning curve. I tackled multiple challenges and overcame them, which I myself couldn't believe that I could do that. So that was another very surprising thing that I learned about myself. The third thing was, this is very important. So grasp the importance of async communication with, because in my project everybody was from different time zones, different countries. So it was really hard to fix a time for a meeting. So I learned how to do a remote communication as well. Received great support from mentors. There's always so much learning from mentors, and definitely gained a lot of confidence after my first PR was merged. So that was my whole experience of the GSOC and my contributions. Just concluding the talk here with the key takeaways that to get started, you find a project suitable for you and get started with small tasks. Don't overwhelm yourself with big features. Start slow. Every contribution is not necessarily related to coding, and I think I have talked briefly about it, and that's true. If even if you are not from the technical background, you can contribute. It's empowering and satisfying, which is again a great point. I think at least it was for me. It was empowering and satisfying at the same time, and any time is the right time to start. So there is no hard and fast rule when you should be start, whenever you get time. So that's all. And here are some important links that I thought you would like to know about. If you're a new contributor, these I'll post it in the chat later, the link for my slide. So you can just go here and see what are the best projects to start with, the list of licenses for open source software. I know I talked about some of the licenses, so you can just see what are the other kinds and uh, uh, which one you should choose for your open source software, some GitHub sponsorship programs, and last, the connect with me on LinkedIn and Medium. So thank you. And yeah, and now I would like to take the questions. Does anyone have any questions? Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, you can definitely, because you can do it in your, because I do it in my extracurricular activities kind of thing. You can just say contributed in open source project and give your project name, even if it is minimal contribution. Does not, yeah, don't be hesitant to not put it in your resume. So it should go in your extracurricular. It should not go in your actual, technical section. And LinkedIn, please do it on LinkedIn. Sorry. Okay, I'm just addressing this. What stage in our university course as a student should we start? Sorry, what do you mean by university course? As a student, like as I told, like as a student, you can start anytime. And for this, for especially for the students, I have this GSOC thing that I would definitely would love that you. I mean, like stage in our degree. Yeah, you can start anytime. That's even if you're in the first year, I would definitely recommend for you to try for the GSOC 2022 and go to the open source and see what GSOC, what Google Summer of Code is, what kind of organization they are selecting. Start contributing in one of them, and you might get selected in the another, like in the 2022 program, because 2021 is already happening. So yeah, just I'm going to the questions. Do you have any preferred tutorials for people who are just starting out to learn vision control or Git? Sorry, version control or Git. Uh, there are like uh, there are lot of materials out there for learning the Git, but I'm not sure what do you mean by that. Maybe Udemy is a very good platform to get started. If you don't know about Git at all, I think you should see your Udemy courses. Yeah. Where can we find you? Oh, yeah, let just a second. I will share it with you guys. Oh, so that would be in the contribution guidelines, Michelle, right? So that is that what you are asking, that if you have a project, like what? Okay. So yeah, that should be in the contribution guideline. If you are using, if there's an open source software out there, there should be a contribution guidelines attached to it. So you should be able to find like how to get started or what are the things that you need to do. That's definitely that's there. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, are there any other questions? Can this be considered as a platform to learn? I mean, for someone who started learning a new language. Yeah, definitely. As I told in one of my presentation, please do treat open source as your learning ground, because there are if I might ask, what is that? What's the new language that you are learning? Maybe it's like Python, JavaScript. Oh yeah, that's Python. Okay, cool. So there are so many Python projects out there. Like, I think the link that I have given you in my PPT, the good pro- uh, projects to get started with, I think that have many of Python projects in there. So please, there will be a small task, as I already told that first contribution. There would be a very small task with a label, first code issue, pick that up, start slowly, and then start contributing to the features, like go even more deeply. I did, let me just put the link in the chat here again. So this is the link to my slide, and you will see the links at the very end of the slide. If there are any new people out here for first contributions, I think please go and check out that link. There are list of projects that you can get started with. So yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. You were so great, and thanks for questioning and answering round. As your experience in web development, which one of these options would you suggest? I would suggest JS. Yeah, if you are looking for yeah, your goal to become a web developer, please go ahead with JS. Yeah, that's the one you should know, because it's used everywhere. I have put my contact details at the very end. Like, if you can see my LinkedIn and Medium, so you can definitely connect with me on Medium, and we can chat whatever questions you have. Definitely, I would love that. No worries. Thank you everyone who attended the session, and I hope you guys enjoyed this and yeah, learned something about open source.